When it comes to the NFL draft, there have been few GMs as good as Brad Holmes. But with this new draft that's about to come up, is it possible that Brad Holmes has met his match? We're going to talk about it in today's episode, folks, so stay tuned.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. It doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and three toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10-5, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Lions fans. Welcome one and all. Hope y'all are having a good day. This is MCM, and I'm your host, David T. Pike. And with that, let's get into it. So, here's the thing, folks. When it comes to the NFL draft, when it comes to that specific part of the offseason, I can probably say with a good amount of certainty that no team or GM as of recent has benefited or exploited the draft more in their favor than the Detroit Lions and Brad Holmes. Again, if you just literally stop and think about it for half a damn second, the Lions have literally skyrocketed to the top echelons of the NFL teams due to just simply how well they have used the draft to their full advantage to advance their team's talent base. Now, when we think about the draft for the Detroit Lions, the Lions long, and I'm talking about Lions fans, the Lions fans long held the draft as kind of their quote-unquote Super Bowl because many fans were always excited with what each new draft class could potentially bring because they always thought that it could be the one that could spark the change. It could turn things around and start the Lions down that path to being relevant again and being successful. And for a long time, the Lions fans, and I would even say the Lions organization itself, was constantly being disappointed due to very lackluster draft classes for the majority of the time, or sometimes they would get a couple of picks here or there that would actually work out. But the problem is that as many of the draft picks that we drafted, what would wind up happening is they would wind up leaving the Lions anyway within a year or a couple of years after they got drafted by the Lions. Or some of them were even out of the league very shortly thereafter. And that was what Lions fans and the Lions had to really deal with for about 2 decades here. However, though, since Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have become the leadership team, the leadership duo for the Detroit Lions, the draft has not only had a massive change as far as what it means for Lions fans, it's become a great event, and it has proven time and time again to be the method that both Holmes and Campbell are wanting to build and mold the team going forward. And you have to realistically think about it here. Since Brad Holmes has been the GM of the Lions, there have been 2 things that the draft has significantly changed about the Lions' fortunes just through the draft alone. First and foremost, let's just understand something here. Like I said, in the past, when the Lions would draft players, there was a pretty good chance that that player was not going to be on the roster within a couple of years. However, ever since Brad Holmes has taken over, the Lions have completely flipped 180 on this. They are now not only drafting players, but they're keeping their players. Again, you can take a look at this to confirm what I'm saying, but I can tell you it's the truth. Every single draft pick that Brad Holmes has had, save one, is still with the team. The only exception to that rule is Chase Lucas, who is now with the 49ers. Otherwise, every single draft pick that Brad Holmes has had over the last 3 years is still with the team. That right there is vastly different from the Lions draft classes and rookies of past years because, like I said, there were times that sometimes rookies didn't even make it out of camp if you got drafted by the Lions. Like, it was not a guaranteed thing if you were a lower-end draft pick that you were going to make it through camp. And then, like I also said, there were times where players wouldn't even get to the end of their rookie contracts before they were released, traded, whatever the case might be. So what does this mean? It means now what's different about the Lions is they're not wasting draft picks and having guys that are coming in and then leaving very shortly thereafter. They're keeping their homegrown talent. They're not constantly bringing in free agencies to, supplement the roster and to try and fill holes. They are trying to build through the draft, which has been proven time and time again, that is the best chance for long-term success. Now, the second thing that has vastly changed with the Lions in terms of draft is their ability to find starting quality players. Again, this was probably by far and large the biggest issue that the Lions have had in the past with their past GMs. The Lions, unfortunately to say, and everybody who's been a Lions fan for the last, 20, 30 years will be able to back me up on this. Lions have had an absolutely just horrible history of drafting busts or players that just simply did not pan out over the last 20 years. And I'll literally just go down this list and you guys can all revel with me in the pain that a lot of these guys put us through. Such guys like Joey Harrington, Charles Rogers, Roy Williams, Mike Williams, Kevin Jones, Gosder Sherrills, Brandon Pettigrew, Jahavid Best, Titus Young, Mikel LaShore, I'm only halfway done, Ryan Broyles, Riley Reif, Eric Ebron, Kyle Vanoy, Amir Abdullah, Gerard Davis, Tease Tabor, DeAndre Swift, Jelani Tavai, and Jeff Okudah. Those names right there are all guys that were drafted in the first or second round, and like I said, they were either just flat out busts or they were huge disappointments. Now, I'm going to be entirely honest. Is that fully 100% on the player? No, it's not. There's obviously other extenuating circumstances that go into the whole thing, whether or not the GM knew what the hell he was doing, because I'm going to say this right now. A lot of those picks by Matt Millen, I guarantee you, if those guys would have gone somewhere else where the guy knew what he was doing, it would have been a different story for them. Other guys like, freaking Jelani Tavai, which was drafted purely because that's what Bob Quinn and freaking Matt Patricia wanted when he was drafted like 3 rounds ahead of where a lot of people were projecting him. That's just being stupid. But again, every single one of those guys that I'm talking about was a bust or a disappointment for Lions and for the Lions organization and for Lions fans. And that right there is 20 names of draft picks that were, like I said, in that category over the course of 2002 to 2020. So again, you're talking about Matt Millen, you're talking about Bob Quinn, you're talking about Martin Mayhew. That right there is the course, if you will, of 3 GMs of work right there. 20 names, all of them pretty much did nothing or barely anything. But let's just put this in perspective, because again, I love doing comparisons. Because if you think about it, that's 20 names over almost 20 years by 3 different GMs. Just to put this in perspective, Brad Holmes has been the GM of the Detroit Lions for 3 years. So 1 GM over 3 years. This is how many draft picks that Brad Holmes has had that have already had some sort of payoff in a large way for the Lions. Penei Sewell, Aleem McNeil, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Aiden Hutchinson, Kirby Joseph, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, Sam Laporta, Brian Branch, Jamison Williams. That right there, in just 3 years, is half of the total bad draft picks that the past 3 GMs over nearly 20 years had done. Because that's 10 names. So in literally about, 3 goes into 20 how many times? Like 6.5 times almost, 7 times almost. So literally, in about a 1/6 or a 1/7 of the time frame, Brad Holmes has already gained half of the ground that 3 other GMs, 3 other regimes with 20 bad draft picks has put together. And all of those draft picks that I just mentioned, those 10 names, have become integral parts of the team. And it just again shows the sheer dominance that Brad Holmes has had in the draft compared to his predecessors. Now, this is where we're going to kind of take the segue into the second part of this episode, which is going to talk about why I think that this could be an interesting draft for Brad Holmes and the Lions. Because while it is absolutely amazing what Brad Holmes has been able to accomplish in the very short span of time that he's been with the Lions, that sheer amount of success is going to make it that much more difficult for him. Because when a GM has this much immediate success, and again, there's no one who can doubt me on that one. Brad Holmes has just been an absolute wizard when it comes to the draft. It also, however, sets a dangerous and sometimes unrealistic expectation from fans to continue to repeat that said success, because it's like, okay, we've seen what Brad Holmes has done over the last 3 years. We want him to continue. We expect him to continue. And that's why I'm saying that expectation could be somewhat unrealistic and could set a dangerous precedent. Because I'm going to say this, myself, I fully expect that Brad Holmes will once again find good prospects and talents that the Lions can and will benefit from having. My issue is not whether or not Holmes is able to do his job, because let's be fair and honest, I just pointed out there very painfully that Brad Holmes has already demonstrated his propensity to do his job immensely well. My concern is fans' potential for unrealistic expectations and, once again, potentially going off on Brad Holmes if they think he didn't have a good draft, which happened a little bit last year, because there were some fans that thought what the analysts thought, that it was a bad draft. And again, Brad Holmes proved that that wasn't the case. But again, we know how everything is kind of like, hey, this is the recency bias. It's just happened. We're going to go based off of what just happened rather than maybe looking down the road. And again, let me explain something here. As Brad Holmes stated, in 3 years like I said, Brad Holmes in 3 years has produced quite a lot of good draft prospects. And so if you think of that track record, plus last year's draft class, which produced 4 immediate starters, one of which that went to the Pro Bowl, this to me could spell trouble, like I said, if some Lions fans don't feel if Holmes has been doing what he has been able to do to keep up the success from past years. And again, that is my primary concern, because sometimes Lions fans, they don't know when to quit. And despite this concern, I truly believe that, like I said, Brad Holmes will again defy the odds. He will pull out another impressive draft class. And there's reason why I think this, more so than just, Brad Holmes' drafting prowess. There's a couple of reasons why I think this. Let's think about this just from the perspective of this point. Think about how many quarterbacks are considered first-round draft picks this year. Personally, I have not gotten into the quarterback class this year because, honestly, Lions aren't interested in a quarterback, and as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to first-round quarterbacks, that right there is a 50-50 hit-or-miss ball jump like you don't know what you're getting. You can say that this guy's going to be great, but if there's one thing I've learned, that don't mean diddly-poo. But if you just think about it, all the analysts that are out there doing mock drafts, there's probably, if I had to take a guess, anywhere between 5 to 6 quarterbacks for this year's draft that are considered first-round talents. Well, think about it. Last year's draft class, there was only 3. And the year before that, there was only 1 that went in the first round. When you have an abundance of quarterbacks that are considered first-round talents with teams that either need a new quarterback or a team that needs a quarterback for the future because the guy that they have either is not going to be there long-term or is getting to that point where he's close to retiring, this drastically pushes down other talents that you could potentially get in later rounds, like where the Lions are at, because there's a lot of QB-needy teams this year. Again, the Patriots need a quarterback. The Broncos, the Vikings, the Bears, the Commanders, the Giants, the Raiders. The Rams are going to need somebody to potentially replace Stafford at a point. And then there's also the Falcons. That right there is a good 8-9 different teams that are in need of a quarterback. And when you only have 5 to 6 quarterbacks that are considered potential first-round grades, that means that a lot of those teams that need a quarterback, they're going to start trying to buy high, which means they're going to try and get these guys as early as possible because they know they're not going to be there long-term, which means that these teams are going to reach, which means the more that teams reach, that means that other talents are going to start sliding down the draft board, which means what does Brad Holmes do? Brad Holmes takes advantage of the draft classes that are given to him. That is one thing he could easily take advantage of because with all the quarterbacks that are going to be wanted this year, it means that other talents are going to be available for him at number 29. However, it's not just the quarterback class that has a big class this year. There's other classes that have, there's other positions that have huge classes for the 2024 draft, such as the cornerback class, such as the wide receiver class. Think about it here, folks. The Lions are considered most likely to go after a cornerback in the early rounds this year. Well, think about this. There are considered 5 first-round cornerbacks this year. You got guys like Cooper DeJean, you got Nate Wiggins, you've got Mitchell, and then you've also got Terrion Arnold. Those right there are 4, and then the guy that I'm most high on is Kool-Aid McKinstry. if you think about it, you have 5 to 6 quarterbacks that could be first-round picks. Then you have another 4 cornerbacks on top of that. That right there is 10 picks potentially. Now, I know that's not how that's going to work, but I'm just simply saying, when you factor that in, and then all the other teams that may not need a quarterback, may not need a cornerback, they might need a lineman or something else, that just further points out what I'm trying to say here. It's going to push other talents further on down the draft board. And again, that's not even including wide receivers. If there's one thing I know about wide receivers in the NFL draft is that usually when one goes, there's a run that starts on them. And again, there's considered 5 to 6 guys in this year's draft that are considered first-round draft talents. So again, just think about it. 5 to 6 quarterbacks that are considered first-round talents. 5 to 6 wide receivers that are considered first-round talent. 5 cornerbacks that are considered first-round talents. Again, I know that not all those guys are going to go in the first round. Or maybe they will. I don't know. Here's what I will say, though. The more talent that you have in individual position groups, it's going to make it a lot better for teams that are at the lower end of the spectrum to potentially get a really good potential draft pick. And again, like I said, that's what Brad Holmes really thrives on, is watching the draft board kind of fall in his lap. Because there have been times that Brad Holmes has decided to trade up and make moves. But there's also been times where Brad Holmes has held his ground, he has sat and he has waited. Again, nobody and their brother thought that frickin' Penei Sewell was going to drop to the Lions at number 7. But Brad Holmes was like, I'm just going to watch the draft board because I think this is how it's going to happen. And we got an absolutely dominating tackle that the Lions are not letting walk out the door anytime soon. And again, that's what Brad Holmes does. He watches what's going on in the draft. He analyzes potential scenarios and how the board's going to fall, and that's how he's able to make his picks. And for me, when I take a look at all the guys that are in these position groups, plus all the other teams that have their different varying needs that may or may not match up with these position groups, it tells me that there's a much higher probability that Brad Holmes will be able to snag a really great prospect at number 29 without having to do anything except just sit and wait. So for me, that is why I think that regardless of whatever happens, I think the Lions are going to be set because, again, when you take a look at what the Lions truly need for this draft, they need help at O-line, they need help at edge and defensive line, cornerback and wide receiver primarily. They also could stand to add another tight end, but that's not nearly as pressing in my opinion. But the whole point of the matter is this. When you think about it, there is definitely a huge amount of prospects that I believe that because of all these other, positions that have these great amount of players to them, that is going to allow Brad Holmes to really pretty much make the best out of the situation that he has. And when you think about it, the primary thing that Brad Holmes is trying to do right now is to improve this roster from where it was last year when it got to the conference championship game. That in of itself is no easy task to do because it's like, listen, you were one game away from the Super Bowl. Now you've got to try and take that team, that roster that you had last year, and you have to improve upon that. But again, because of what Brad Holmes has done, regardless of whether or not I think this is going to be his most challenging draft yet, because I do think it is, surely because of the fact that the draft is in Detroit, he's trying to improve the roster on where it was last year with the conference championship game, and on top of the fact that, the Lions are trying to maintain their status quo in the NFC North Division, I have nothing but the utmost confidence and trust that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell are going to get it done because that is what they have done over the course of the last freaking 3 years. So for me, even though I expect that this is going to be a very interesting draft and I'm pretty confident that Brad Holmes is going to have to test his mettle, he is going to have to put everything into it to make sure it goes the way he would like it to go, I'm pretty confident in this. As Brad Holmes said, every draft provides its own unique challenges. But I have no doubt in my mind that Brad Holmes will rise to the challenge and give the Lions another great draft class. But anyway, folks, I just wanted to present my thoughts on this. Just wanted to talk about it really quickly. Again, with the draft getting here, it's much more important than ever to start talking about this stuff. So having said that, I'm going to end the episode and say thank you all for watching in another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, highly encourage all to watch the next episode. Also encourage all to do one of these three things: like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and you've not yet had a chance to do so, again, I'm going to highly encourage all to do this first. Please make sure you subscribe, but also after you subscribe, make sure you turn on that bell notification icon as well, so that way you never miss any more content that I push out. Again, subscription numbers are always going up, but we want to make sure you guys turn on that notification icon, so that way as soon as I push something out, you guys can come right back into the stream. I also encourage y'all, please, to make sure you share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere you can with everybody and anybody that you can. The more we can share it, the greater the channel can grow, the greater the channel can spread. And with that being said, to everybody, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you all have something that makes you smile. I hope you all have something that makes you happy. Hope you all enjoyed the content as well. And with that, God bless, and until the next time we meet, I'll see y'all in the next episode.